Sup you beautiful people. Hope you've had a fantastic day. Welcome back to another new episode of What If Deku Becomes a Pokemon Trainer. In this story, it is simply what you might expect. The story of My Hero Academia, but in world filled with not only quirks, but also Pokemon. If you guys enjoy this what if, comment down below and let me know. And go ahead and check out other what ifs in the channel, after watching this video. Before we get into it though, don't forget to subscribe and leave a like, and also share this video with your friends. So let's start this video. All Might stood with the rest of the teachers and clapped, his smile so wide it threatened to break his face. A surge of overwhelming pride filled the symbol of Peace's heart as he gazed upon his successor, any shadow of a thought he possibly had destroyed harder than a full-powered Detroit Smash ever could. Izuku's speech touched many of the hearts of the student as well. The business course students examined him with newfound interest, as well as the support course students, with even the pink-haired girls smiling wide and interested. The general studies students were wide-eyed and slack-jawed, tears of guilt, sympathy, and ignited passion welling their once miserable eyes. Mineta wailed dramatically and jumped and clapped for his friend who inspired him to continue to hope and never give up. Shinsu stared wide eyes at Izuku with surprise. He's just like me. Shinsu thought, his thoughts going back to the past, the stares, and the snickers. Monoma gawked at Izuku Midoriya, his words somehow resonating in him, before blind pride clouded his judgment and glared hatefully and jealously at him. Just you wait, Izuku Midoriya, I will make you regret those words, and we will see who is truly the star of this school. Monoma thought. The rest of Class 1B felt differently to their overzealous member with many wide-eyed, smiling, nodding, and inspired. Tetsu was practically crying at Midoriya's manliness, Kendo nodded approvingly, and clapped for her fellow class rep, and Takage smiled widely, her heart beating wildly, both inspired and interested. Damn it sniff, that was the most manliest speech I've ever heard. Kirishima exclaimed, rivers of tears that would rival Izuku and his mother flowing free from his eyes. I'm so blessed to have a pick-a-bro like him. Kaminari joined his red-haired classmate in wailing and cheer. I'm so pumped up. Mina and Higakure hugged each other as they cried buckets upon Izuku's speech, resisting every urge in their bodies to run up and hug the broccoli-haired teen they've grown to like. Asui croaked joyfully for Izuku, wiping away a rare tear of emotion from her eyes. Kyoka stared at Izuku with wide eyes while her heart beat loudly. I think I'm starting to see why the girls are so interested in him, she thought numbly. Momo covered her mouth, trying to keep back the sobs of joy and pride for her friend and crush, tears welling up her eye. Iida clapped passionately, happy for his friend, now completely as sure of his choice to vote for Izuku to be class rep, and see as a worthy rival. Todoroki was even taken back, his cold eyes widened in shock at how similar he and Midoriya's pasts are. His scarred side of his face twitched and itched, a flash of memory to a woman with white hair popping up in his head, that caused him to hiss in pain. Bakugo stared numbly at Deku, silent shock, drowning out the cheers and claps for the green-haired nerd. His fury and anger came back then with a passion, glaring hatefully at his former punching bag, unaware of his place. Deku, I'll show you your place, you worthless caterpie. Bakugo growled mentally. Deku. Uraraka thought, wiping away her tears, his words resonating with her and her parents' past, the thumping in her heart growing louder and more passionately as she stared at Izuku, his words setting her ablaze with strength and hope. Izu, Serena choked up happily, feeling tears flow down her face as Izuku spoke from the heart. Her hands clenched her shirt over her heart tightly, and felt like she fell in love with Izuku all over again. Izuku stood frozen and stunned by the loud cheers and claps for him. Izuku didn't know what to expect of the crowd as he gave his bold speech. Disbelief, booing, maybe some light cheers and claps, but the roaring approval of the crowd made Izuku as frozen and stunned as they were only a few moments ago. A most excellent speech, Master Izuku. He heard Froki speak in his mind. Truly an inspiring speech I knew only you could deliver with such passion. That was amazing, Izuku. Komaskin cheered as well. Don't you dare belittle your speech's impact. Look. They love it, as we did. That's our boss for you. Never doubted you for a second. Pikachu jumped in, ignoring Komaskin's sputters of disbelief. I knew you could do it, Izuku. Izuku was taken back by Pikachu's last words, how emotionally sincere they were, in contrast to Pikachu's normal cool guy facade, but when he called him by his name, he knew the words to be full of sincerity and pride. Izuku could already feel his lip quivering. I never doubted you either, Izuku. Eevee finally said, Izuku feeling the smile on Eevee's face. Look at the crowd and how they loved your speech. They love you, as we do. You made us, Serena, your classmates, your mother, and All Might proud. Izuku choked upon a sob, tears flowing down his cheeks, and his teeth mashing together in a painful yet joyful smile, flashing it to the sky above where his fist struck upwards. Oh yeah. Give it up to Izuku Midoriya for that awesome, soul-stirring speech. Mick roared out, the crowd cheering even louder than before. What did you think about the speech from your student, Eraser? It was a bit long, but it not only boosted the crowd's enthusiasm, it worked to embolden the students to do their best. Eraser analyzed and summarized the speech with a nod. I'm impressed. Nice job, kid. As Izuku was congratulated by Midnight and walked down to his fellow students, head held high and tears wiped away, they almost came back with force at the rare praise from his teacher. You hear the sports fans. Izuku's speech even managed to melt Eraser's cold, mean heart. Mick replied. Why you Eraser's mic was cut off swiftly, much to the amusement of the crowd and students of 1A. As Izuku walked up to his fellow students' competition, he was met with affirmative nods, approving smiles, claps, and even looks of respect from the other courses. Of course, as Izuku made his way to stand beside Iida and Momo, his gaze met with Bakugo's. Surprisingly enough, Bakugo didn't say anything, but his glare and frown told Izuku everything he needed. Bakugo then walked past him, brushing him off rudely, though, with the hype of his own cheer still fresh in his mind, Izuku didn't care. Well, without further ado, it's time to get started, Midnight proclaimed. This is where you begin feeling the pain. Just like that, Uraraka questioned. Yes, they don't want to let us catch our breath or prepare for too long. Asui shrugged. Now to announce the first game of the festival. Midnight cracked her whip into the air as a holographic screen materialized behind her. On the screen, a rectangular bar appeared in the center, words and images appearing and disappearing like a roulette wheel in a casino. The students and crowd waited in silent anticipation. Finally, it stopped on an event colored in yellow, with a stick figure of a person and a Pokemon jumping over a hurdle. Partner obstacle course. Partner obstacle course? Serena questioned. All 11 classes will participate in this treacherous contest, Midnight announced, showing the 11 classes in course circling the stadium. They will run 4 kilometers around the outside of the stadium and back here. While I do not wish to restrain anybody in this event, there are a few rules to follow. The screen showed a stick figure with a random Pokemon. Every student must have one of their Pokemon out to run with them. Their placement in the running will only count once both trainer and Pokemon reach the finish. And think carefully on who to choose because you are forbidden from carrying your Pokemon. I see. Iida hummed, cupping his chin. Not only will we have to show off and use our own individual quirks to reach the end as fast as possible, but show the skills and speed of our Pokemon to show that they can keep up with us, especially when we become heroes chasing after villains. We also have to be cautious on which one to choose. Momo jumped in. We cannot bring out our lightest Pokemon to carry around, so the slower your team is, the more of a disadvantage you are in. There are still some ways to make this easy, Ojiro said. Flying Pokemon that are large enough could carry you, and some Pokemon can teleport, so they can just warp you to the finish line easily. Ichako quickly thought to her Kirlia, who could easily teleport her to the finish line or make herself weightless, and have Minior float her weightless body to the finish. Despite his aversion to cheat the system, Iida likewise thought that flying on Skarmory would get him to the finish easily. Tokoyami thought the same with riding on Corviknight. Oh, almost forgot, you are also forbidden from riding your own Pokemon, and in addition, flying or teleporting to the finish line on your Pokemon is also prohibited. Same goes for Pokemon teleporting on their own to the finish and waiting. Midnight added, her grin devious as if she heard Ojiro. Aw man. Kirishima sighed, his plans for riding on Rhyhorn going up in flames. Ojiro sweat-dropped, feeling like he ended up jinxing himself and his classmates. But as for you students, Midnight chuckled, licking her lips in mischievousness. As long as you stay on the course, you're free to use your quirks however you wish. Bakugo grinned maliciously. Todoroki's cold eyes narrowed. Shinsu flashed a devious 2B grin. Izuku nodded, eyes determined and ready. Now, choose which Pokemon you wish to race with quickly. Midnight cracked her whip towards the large doors right of her. You have 1 minute and then, take your positions. With the short time limit, the students immediately rushed towards the doors, hands racing down to their belts to pull out and summon their Pokemon. Uraraka was quick to bring out her Mini, while Iida decided on his Dojo and Momo on Togetic. Many more of the students brought out their flying Pokemon, such as Mina and a Golbat, Kyoka with the Noivern, and Tokoyami with his Corviknight. While they couldn't fly on them, it would be better to have their fast, aviary Pokemon to race alongside them, in case of any booby traps that UA has sure to place along the track. Others with no such options resorted on their fastest land Pokemon. Such choices included Denki's Blitzel, Kirishima's new Rockruff, Todoroki and his Owlin Ninetales, and Bakugo with Kolava. Meanwhile, Izuku was quickly working out his choices within his mind. If we are going based on pure speed, then I can't choose Eevee or Froakie, Izuku thought. Well, they are fast, Eevee can get tired easily with a long run like this, and can't use quick attack forever. And while Froakie would be very useful in case on any need to jump, he could lag behind me if I go full Cowling. So that leaves Pikachu and Combuskin. Izuku looked at the Pokeball. Izuku looked over at Todoroki and his Ninetales, as they gazed at the doors silently. I know Todoroki is going to try something right off the bat. He made that clear with his declaration of war. Izuku looked at the tall doors yet narrow length. The doorway is likely narrow, so it would be a hassle to go through with so many people, and their Pokemon. Izuku looked back at Todoroki. Especially if the place is iced over. Izuku looked back down at his Pokeballs and nodded. Then the choice is clear. Izuku thought with finality. With the time over and the doors opening up to reveal its narrow pathway, all of the students stood gathered around before the doors, the front a large crowd of them, almost shoulder to shoulder with their Pokemon floating, standing, or crouched by their sides. The first of the 3 green lights turned off, counting down the start. This is it. Izuku thought, looking at the doors. Both he and Combuskin crouched in a running start. We have to be smart about this. With UA, no task is ever really simple. Izuku turned to Combuskin and smirked. Let's do this, Combuskin. Combuskin nodded, a fierce glint in her eyes. You can count of me, Izuku. She mentally said back. Let's do this. Izuku nodded and turned back to the path ahead. All Might. Mom. Izuku imagined All Might and his mother watching him on from the stands. I hope you guys are watching. The second light turned off. All Might's clasped hands tightened. Inko's hands clenched the end of her dress skirt. I'll make you too proud. Izuku's eyes flashed green with energy. The last light went out with a buzz. Begin. Midnight shouted. Immediately, the students and Pokemon booked it towards the doors as fast as possible. And we're off to a racing start. Mick announced. Any colorful commentary for us, mummy man? How did you talk me into this? Aizawa were groaned again. What should we be paying attention to the early stages of the race? Mick continued, undeterred by his co-host's lack of enthusiasm. The doorway. Aizawa answered, simply. True to his words, the narrow doorway was full of crowded teens and Pokemon, all smashed together and complaining, as they tried to push and nudge each other away. Mineta was being smashed and squished against multiple legs, their knees striking the sides of his head. Izuku scoffed and grunted as he tried shoving people off of him and Combuskin. Momo clicked her teeth in discomfort as he tried worming her way out, a comical tick mark on her head, as she felt not so subtle elbows rubbing on her large breasts, and the blushes on the guys beside her. She would have gave them a piece of her mind, likely with a metal bat to their perverted heads, but she shook those thoughts aside as she stared towards the bright end of the doorway. They're testing us already. Momo realized. Trying to see how we get out of this debacle. Serena grunted, trying to worm her way across the crowd of students. Serena tried looking for Izuku, losing track of him in this mass of bodies. She blinked her eyes as she remembered Izuku's speech, his words to the class in the waiting room, and his gaze towards her, as they went towards the doors to wait. I can't be focused on following Izu. Serena thought, stealing her nerves. He told us to give it our all, and I will. He trusts me to my best, and I will trust him too. So this is the first obstacle. Todoroki muttered, cold mist forming around him. How fortuitous. Suddenly, a burst of cold air exploded out from the doorway, freezing the ground and the walls outside. In a sprint, Todoroki raced out the doorway and in the lead, Ninetales running down with him, her movements unbothered by the ice. Apologies. Todoroki said as he continued running. Behind him, many of the students and Pokemon of the other courses were trapped, their feet stuck frozen to the ice, all except the flying types who merely slowed in discomfort at the cold air around them. Ugh, no fair. One student groaned as he tried to pry his feet off the ice. Uo, talk about playing dirty, or rather icy. Mick snickered at his pun. The students are stuck frozen on the track. Todoroki used the narrow surroundings to his advantage, and froze his competition in their tracks with a single powerful wave of ice. Aizawa was summarized for the cheering crowd. A well-thought and planned move that didn't affect his chosen Pokemon, too. And with that, Shoto Todoroki of Class 1 is off to an early start. Mick announced. Huh. But what's this? Todoroki looked back to the sounds of explosions and exertions. Bakugo flew over the track of ice, his explosions lifting him upwards. His Kolava likewise jumped over the field of ice with his trainer. He likewise saw Aoyama fire a naval laser, blasting him off into the air, while his Starmie floated over the ice, Yoi Rosa pole vaulting over from a pole she created out of her hands with her Togetic flying beside her, and the rest of Class 1 following. Nice trick, Todoroki. Momo yelled out. I wouldn't let you get away so easily, you icy hot bastard. Bakugo roared out in rage, blasting towards Todoroki. Ojiro and Ambipom sprung up from the ground, passing over the wave of ice. I saw you do this in the battle training exercise. Don't think you can catch me off guard like that. Ojiro said, Tokoyami beside him springing up via Dark Shadow's shadowy claws. Mina jumped over the wave of ice, quickly firing her acid from the holes off her shoes, sliding down the ice, Golba flying over her. Asui jumped high over with Polidid. Kirishima jumped over and smashed his hardened fingers into the icy floor, cracking through. Yeah. Kirishima yelled as he began speed crawling with Rockruff beside him, his rocky paws easily cracking through the ice. Did you not learn from our braining training exercise, Todoroki? Serena chuckled, turning his ice into a watery slide for her to surf, her new Buzel surfing behind her. Your ice just makes things easier for me and my quirk. Gotta wait for the right time to show off my quirk. Uraraka declared, as she stomped carefully on the ice while Minnie just floated over. Behind her, among several of other students who escaped the freezing wave, Shinsu was spotted behind, lifted up and carried over the ice by a pair of students, all of whom looked dazed and wide-eyed. Beside him, his drowsy was being carried by other Pokemon via hypnosis. So they are good at using their powers, huh? Shinsu asked himself. Talk about cold. Takage shivered, now suddenly split into multiple pieces that were floating over the track. But don't count my class out yet. Behind her, a rumble occurred as her Gabite sprang out of the icy ground, called out its name before diving back down through the floor and into the earth, continuing to dig through the ground. I didn't expect for so many people to dodge my attack, Todoroki said, surprised. Especially those from other classes. One for all. Full cowling. Izuku sprang into the air, body alive with green bioelectricity. Combusken, jump and paved the way with flame charge. Combusken. The young foul Pokemon cried out, her body covered in fire and jumped forward, landing and melting the area. Her feet landed quickly before jumping upwards and forwards, continuing the process. Just behind her, Izuku landed onto where she did and jumped again, following her. I knew Todoroki would pull something like that, Izuku thought as he analyzed the situation. With this icy floor, it would be hard for even those who dodged the first wave to advance quickly. I wouldn't be able to run fast with full cowling. Did he do that specifically to counter me? No, it doesn't matter in the end. It was a good thing I chose Combusken. Izuku looked to where Combusken landed before jumping off and landed, carefully placing his feet to where her talons did. With her flame charge, she could easily burn enough of the ice to make stepping stones for me to jump on, burning enough for my feet to land on. Izuku looked back to the rest of his competition who tried to steady themselves on his stepping stones. I could have had her just blaze a trail simply by running, but this makes it harder for those behind me to follow me and Combusken's far jumps, spacing the stepping stones far enough for no regular person to copy. Looking forwards towards Todoroki and the rest of his class, Izuku thought that's enough thinking, just do. Copying Izuku, Mineta ripped off the purple balls from his head, then being easily replaced by new ones quickly, and tossed them onto the icy floor. Mineta would jump and land on the balls before hopping and jumping off towards the next ones. You think you are so cool, but I've outsmarted you, Mineta declared while in midair, an incredibly determined and pleased grin on his face. How pathetic, Todoroki. Present Mick. Minoru Mineta. Quirk. Pop off. He can remove those purple balls off his head and toss them out, where they are replaced by new ones. They can stick onto any surface and trap those unfortunate enough to get caught in them, while he can bounce off them. Take too many out too quickly and he'll start to bleed. So gross. Eat this. My special attack. Mineta roared out, taking out another purple ball and aiming it towards Todoroki below him. Grape. Mineta was cut off and smacked in the air by a large robotic arm. Mineta wailed as he flew and rolled away. Are you okay? Izuku asked, worried. He looked to what did that, his eyes widening in surprise. Target acquired. You a robot declared in a robotic voice. Objective. Terminate. It's those robots from the entrance exam. Izuku frowned. Standing in the students' way were a cluster of entrance exam robots of varying size and shape, with the ones at the very back being the colossal, Groudon-looking zero-pointer, now joined by a whole pack of zero-pointers. Oh? Enemies have shown up out of nowhere. Mick declared excited. We are in for a treat, folks. A test of strength and cunning. It's a Robo-Armageddon. Kaminari slid to a stop, gazing up at the large robots in terror. Well wait, are those the zero-pointers from the practical test? Kaminari questioned loudly. Many of the other course students likewise gazed up and gawked in terror of the behemoth-sized robots, pondering out loud how the hero course students managed against them. This is what Izu and the others had to deal with, Serena asked, she and Buzel wide-eyed in shock. So, this is what the other students faced in their entrance exam. Todoroki said, taking a ready stance. Where does the school even get the funding for this stuff? Gyoi Rozo asked. Nezu, up in the teacher's stands, raised a pawed finger up to his grinning mouth. Inko, Mitsuki, and Misera looked at the screen showing the event along with the rest of the crowd. Ha, I guess that brat wasn't bragging about those things being colossal. Mitsuki simply said, wide-eyed surprised. Izuku. Inko muttered, worried for her son. As the zero-pointers lumbered towards him, Todoroki crouched down, eyes spreading around him rapidly. They must have gone through a lot of trouble making these, but I expected for them to give me a bit more of a challenge. Todoroki muttered. The zero-pointer's clawed hand reached down to him, his eyes spread more and more. Todoroki looked up with a fiercely determined glare in his cold eyes. Especially since my dear old dad is watching. With a strong wave of his right hand forwards, a large blast wave of ice and cold shot out, and completely froze the lumbering zero-pointer dead in its tracks. Todoroki simply breathed in deeply and exhaled, letting out a breath of cold air. Amazing. Mick roared out in conjecture with the roars of the crowd. With a simple swipe of his hand, one of the zero-pointers that gave our hero course students such trouble in the entrance exam has been frozen completely by Todoroki. Such power. All Might gasped, still in impressed awe at the power and control of the first-year students. Whoa. Now that was some power. Mirio, back in the stands, declared, flexing his arms. So cold. Amajiki shivered. Oh come on, Tamaki. You can't even feel the cold from here. Nejire chided her shy companion. Getting up from his crouched stance, Todoroki and Ninetales took off between the frozen robot's legs. Look, he stopped the robot. One student yelled out through the cold mist. Look, between its legs. We can get through. Another student shouted. Careful now. I froze it when it was off its balance. Todoroki called out as he finished passing under the frozen robot, its ice cracking and breaking apart. On purpose. The once fully frozen robot lowered and fell down behind Todoroki and Ninetales as they continued running. And with that, Todoroki of Class 1 goes back to an early lad. Mick continued announcing. Amazing. He's one we should watch. It almost seems unfair. Thoughts. His attack was both offensive and defensive. As always stated. No wonder he was let in on recommendations. Mick announced loudly. He never even fought those robo-infernos, but they were no match him. But now let's see how the rest of the contestants fare against these robot menaces. Wait, what about those guys that were under it when it fell? One of the students asked, suddenly worried. Are people actually going to die here? And other students freaked out. Suddenly, the armor of the giant mechanical Groudon cracked and protruded. Finally, bursting free with a roar was a hardened Kirishima, along with his Rockruff, yelling we're alive. And it's Kirishima from Class 1A. What a hardcore showing from his young rookie. Mick proclaimed. Jesus, Todoroki, didn't think you'd do something so underhanded like that. Kirishima groaned as he shook his head. Anybody but me could have been killed. You could have squashed Rockruff. Kirishima rubbed his Pokemon, said Rockruff, enjoying the attention, checking to see if it was okay. Present Mick. Ijiro Kirishima. Quirk. Hardening. His quirk turns his body as rock hard as a repairer's plating, making him the ultimate shield or a devastating weapon. The chassis of the robot once more bulged and cracked again, to Kirishima's left, to his surprise. Geez, other than that manly Midoriya fellow, Class 1 is full of jerks. Bursting free from the robot, Tetsu from Class 1B came out, by his side, a bronzer floating out with him. When I get my hands on him, I'll smash that ice guy. Woo? It's Tetsu from Class 1B, who was also stuck underneath. What are the odds? Mick rhetorically asked. Letting out a puff and petting his bronzer, Tetsu muttered, you know anybody, but me could have been killed, and he could have squished bronzer if I wasn't there. Present Mick. Tetsu. Quirk. Steel. His quirk turns his body as shiny and hard as an Agron's plating, making him the ultimate shield or a devastating weapon. Whoa, deja vu. Our quirks are pretty much the same. Kirishima groaned in dismay. Now how am I supposed to stand out? You copycat. Even our quirk descriptions were pretty much the same. Tetsu whined, breaking the fourth wall, much like he broke through the robot. Man, those two are lucky to have such strong quirks. Kaminari muttered. They don't have to worry about not being crushed. Just as some of the students were getting over their surprise, some even mentioning of working together to fight the robots, they were quickly interrupted by the sounds of explosions. They looked in time to see Bakugo flying his way into the air and towards the zero-pointer. No way am I letting that icy hot bastard beat me. Bakugo growled, flying over the zero-pointer's claw and landing on his shoulder. Class 1A's Katsuki Bakugo is flying over the obstacles. Clever. Mick announced. As talented as ever. Mitsuki, in the stands, let out an annoyed groan, much to Inko's sweat-dropped expression. Please, honey, be a little more supportive of our son. Misaru insisted. This is me supporting him, you lovable idiot. Mitsuki yelled in retort. Bakugo peeked down to see Kolava following his lead, zipping and speeding past the other robots with quick attack, as expected. Bakugo let out a rare satisfied smirk, before noticing he wasn't the only one soaring over the zero-pointer. I figured you would have tried to one-up Todoroki and blast 1 or 2 zero-pointers with your quirk. Sero called out, swinging upwards into the air by swinging up the zero-pointer with his tape. Swinging right next to him, using string shot, was Sero's Leathany. Can't lie and say I'm not impressed. Present Mick. Hand to Sero. Quirk. Tape. He can shoot out tape-like material from his weird elbows, and stick onto objects or wraps things up. His traps with his quirk can make an Ariados quiver in shame. Following closely behind was Tokoyami and his Corvic Knight, the former being lifted and swung upwards via Dark Shadow and his claws, while the latter simply flew on up. If I can't hitch a ride on Corvic Knight, I'll hitch a ride on my Shadow. Tokoyami declared. Let's land, Dark Shadow. Aye. The shadowy bird-looking quirk cried out, extending its shadowy arms forward. Present Mick. Fumakage Tokoyami. Quirk. Dark Shadow. He's got some shadow-like monster inside him that can materialize and morph into whatever creation he wants. As the three zipped down behind the robot to continue the race, Izuku grinned. Bakugo, Sero, and Tokoyami got the right of it. Izuku thought, looking at the zero-pointers. We don't need to destroy the zero-pointers. We just have to get by as fast possible. But Izuku looked at the smaller robot enemies in his way and flashed a wide grin. Showboating with these wouldn't hurt too much, right All Might? Sparking with full cowling, Izuku yelled, "Let's go, Combuskin." "You got it," the Pokemon replied, already knowing what her trainer had in mind. Quickly, the two shot forwards towards the robots. Up in the teacher's stands, they watched the event through the monitors. "Looks like all the leaders are from Class 1A," Snipe mentioned. "At least for now." "Yeah, but it's not like 1B and the other students are doing poorly," All Might said, grinning proudly. "It's just that Class 1A's learned not to hesitate." Aizawa, unknowingly, finished All Might's sentence. Iida and Dajuo ran at high speeds forwards. Iida hopped and planted his right foot onto one of the smaller robots. With a push, the robot fell to the ground while Iida somersaulted off. Dajuo jumped from another robot's jab, landing one of its talons on the back of its robot head and vaulting. Gyro stuck her jacks onto the sides of two robots, unleashing her heartbeat and running past the malfunctioning, collapsing robots with a smirk. Her Noibut evaded and swerved from the non-lethal missiles of the robots, unleashing a supersonic attack that caused the firing robots to sputter and twitch. Kaminari hopped over a robot's punch, landing on it and unleashing his quirk on it, the robot electrocuted to destruction. His Blitzel ran up and fired a blast of electricity into the slowly dunce-turning teen, now recharged and ready to run again. "They've seen what the real world is like," Aizawa continued. "They felt the fear of facing villains, yet they fight on, trying to overcome that fear." Asui jumped up onto and crawled and hopped quickly over a zero-pointer with her Polydip. Uraraka and Minnie ran and floated down the track, Uraraka looking behind her and pressing her fingertips together. Just as two robots fell down to the ground, their gravity returned. Ojiro and Ambipom flung their tails onto two robots, smashing them to pieces easily. Using the ice from Todoroki's attack, Serena formed the ice into two water whips. She launched them forwards, slashing through their metal hides easily, her Buzel knocking one from behind her with a sonic boom. "They've grown, all of them," Aizawa continued. "And they know that they have to act quickly in order to survive." "Detroit smash!" Izuku yelled, smashing his full calling fist into the head of robot, tearing through it easily. The green-haired teen wasted no second and sped forwards, tearing through more and more robots that came his way with punches, kicks, and even fling them away like they were ragdolls. Combuskin followed her trainer, blitzing through the robots with flame charge or breaking through with double kick and shadow claw. "Last time I faced these things, I only mastered one for all to 4%, and I barely got in thanks to those rescue points." Izuku thought back to the entrance exam, and the 26 points he managed to score off the robots he destroyed. "But now, I've doubled my progress." Izuku remembered his training and progress since then, fighting Bakugo, fighting villains, saving Satsuki from Wishiwashi. Tearing through two more robots, Izuku smiled wide. These robots aren't that tough at all. Gaining an idea, Izuku grabbed the arm of the last robot in his path. "Combuskin." Izuku yelled over to his Pokemon. "Right," she replied, getting the message. With his enhanced strength, Izuku swung the zero-pointer around before swinging it forwards in time for Combuskin to tear through its arm, leaving Deku to hold the limb. With a metallic tear, Izuku pulled off the plating of the arm, quickly wrapping the loose wire around his torso, and carrying the metal plate on his back like it was nothing. "I don't know what else they might throw at us, but can be too careful," Izuku thought as he and Combuskin raced on. Hearing explosions, Deku saw a few of the zero-pointers, their heads smoking, collapsing to the ground. Looking back, Izuku saw that it came from Momo, a literal cannon, formed out of her exposed stomach, the cause of the attack. She noticed Deku staring and gave a thumbs up. Izuku smiled and gave one back before rushing forward. Izuku and Combuskin zipped and weaved through the zero-pointers, jumping onto the swiping arm of another. Racing and jumping up towards its head, Izuku smirked, getting a reckless idea. "Oh, what the heck. Combuskin," Izuku called out. "Like you read my mind," Combuskin cried out. The two jumped high into the air, near the face of the robot Graden's face. Izuku grabbed Combuskin's arm and swung, pivoting and twirling his body in midair, till the two looked like a spinning top. With a toss, Izuku called out spinning double kick. The flung Combuskin soared towards the zero-pointer, sticking its glowing white feet out towards the robot and spinning again, this time vertically. Instantly, the young foul Pokemon tore through the ground in its metallic eye, and out the back of its head. Detroit smash! Izuku yelled as he soared forwards, striking his fist out, as he likewise blasted through the other side of the robot Groudon's head, all the while smiling like his idol. And that was everyone's favorite speaker, Izuku Midoriya, tearing through robots, small and tall, like they were nothing. Mick exclaimed to the cheering roar of the crowd. "My baby!" Inko cried out, waterfall tears already blasting from her eyes. "Whoa. You weren't kidding when you said Izuku manifested a quirk." Mitsuki gazed in awe at the once quirkless boy now tearing apart robots like they were made of paper. What was his quirk again? As if hearing her, Mick asked, "Just what kind of a quirk is that?" By Midoriya's words, it's called Aura Force. Aizawa answered, looking through one of the notebooks that Izuku handed to him before the festival, in case he needed to explain his and his classmates' quirks more. Allows him to tap into his own life force energy, known as aura, to greatly enhance his strength and speed to superhuman levels. And he has shown even greater control and use safely than before. Nejire's eyes blinked and widened in shock. Aura force, she muttered loudly, earning looks of confusion by Mirio and Tamaki. Pardon. Mick did a double take on what Aizawa said. Like Midoriya said in his speech, his quirk manifested later than everyone else, only manifesting a few months ago. Aizawa explained. He can channel that energy of his safely in lower percentages, since his body isn't fully accustomed to his own quirk's full power, resulting in him breaking his limbs. At his strongest, he could destroy a zero-pointer completely in one punch. This time he has shown greater control, analysis, and teamwork with his Pokemon. Impressive. You heard that, folks. Class 1A's very own class rep, Izuku Midoriya, was going easy on those robots. Mick announced dramatically. If his speech from before wasn't enough, he is definitely one up-and-coming star you will want to keep your eyes peeled on. All Might proud smiler grew whiter at the affirmative roar and cheer of the crowd. Aura force. Aura force. Or. Nejire muttered, seemingly lost in her own world and thoughts. Nejire. Mirio said her name slowly as he waved his hand over her eyes, the periwinkle-haired girl not noticing or caring. Well, she's gone to La La Land, Tamaki. I feel sorry for that kid when Nejire gets her hands on him. Tamaki shuddered in fear. You and me both. Mirio nodded, affirmative, his eyes going back to the screen, and watching more of the Izuku Midoriya, that Sir Knight I wanted him to see. You don't have to take out those giant robots to get through, but taking them down does make for greater chance to show your skills. Snipe said to the teachers. And despite their size, they are just slow-moving hunks of metal. Easy to break through if you know where to hit. All Might stared at Izuku blasting through the zero-pointer with that smile, almost like seeing a young version of himself. Suddenly, All Might was filled a wave of guilt. I've asked so much of you, young Midoriya. All Might thought to his talk with Midoriya 2 weeks ago. You don't have to come in first, just get to the next round, and you'll be fine. And with that, it seems like most of the contestants have reached the second obstacle. Mick announced. And if you thought the first one was tough, let's see how these students handle the fall. Uraka, Mina, and Asui gaped in shock at the fall. It was a large and wide canyon, the wide and dark abyss full of tall, rising pillars of rock with flat platforms, each one of varying size, width, and length apart. An intricate web of wires connected many of the rock pillars to others nearby. When did they have time to build something like this? Uraka questioned. Was it thanks to Mr. Cementus? Mina asked. Instead of asking questions, Asui simply jumped up, landing on one wire with her hands and feet, and beginning to crawl forwards on the wire. This is it, my moment to shine. Asui croaked. Come on, Polidid. Poli. The frog Pokemon croaked, following its trainer's lead. Whoa, she's fast. Mina said, impressed. The two girls were drawn to the almost mad cackle coming from behind them. Yes. This is my chance to show off what I can do. The voice said. My support items are going to steal the spotlight from these one-up heroes. Looking behind them, the two pink-themed girls met another pink-haired girl. Her pink hair was styled in thick dreadlocks reached down to her shoulders, her eyes hidden behind a large weird set of goggles and headwear. All they could see of her face was her wide grinning smile. A harness of sorts was fitted over her UA uniform, a metal band strapped across her waist just below her large breasts, two protruding harnesses on either side, and everyone. Observe what my brilliant gadgets can do. The pink-haired girl declared, spreading her arms out wide. My fire arrows and hammer souls. Wait, you're from the support course, aren't you? Uraka asked the girl. Hey, how come you got to bring all that stuff? Mina accused the support course students. Students in the hero course get all kinds of combat training to hone their quirks, so to give us a fighting chance and keep things fair, we are allowed to bring whatever gadgets and costumes into the game that we, ourselves, make. The girl answered. So sit back and enjoy the show. Just as she finished, one of her harpoons fired off, opening up and latching onto a far-off pillar. For those of us in the support course, this is the perfect time for us to show off our gadgets to any support companies, so they can recruit us. The girl was lifted off the ground via the thrusters on her boots, releasing bursts of air. Hope you all are watching me, support companies. Let me show you all what my babies can do. With that, May blasted forwards, falling into the dark abyss. As she fell enough, May pressed a button of a device in her hand. The pulley system in her pack switched gears and began to pull her up from the harpoon on the pillar. She landed on said pillar, her hammer souls blasting her forward. She launched off the pillar and into the air, arms spread wide and cackling with mad glee, before landing on one pillar and continuing. As her Porygon followed her silently, Mina groaned, man, talk about annoying. Don't just sit there stunned, girls. Serena's voice called out from behind them. They turned to watch the strawberry blonde-haired girl race past them towards the fall. This isn't the time to gawk. Izu and the others are already ahead of us. Serena ran up to a particular wire, covered in ice, evidence of Todoroki using it to slide across. Hopping onto the icy wire, she immediately turned it to wire and began surfing up the wire. Taking notice of what Serena said, Uraraka looked further on in the canyon of pillars to see Todoroki, Bakugo, Izuku and the others far ahead. Todoroki was seen sliding across the wires, turning them into ice for him to slide on. Bakugo was flying over the canyon with his explosions, Sero and Tokoyami swung from pillar to pillar with their quirks, and Kirishima and Tetsu were balancing. Uraraka focused towards Izuku, highlighted by his green bioelectricity. She watched as he leaped from one pillar over another, jumping on the far closer pillars than risking the larger gaped ones. Kamiskin was in fact ahead of him, her body cloaked in a white trail of aerial ace, as she jumped and soared from one platform to another easily. Seeing their determination, especially Deku's, Uraraka steeled her nerves. "I won't lose," she proclaimed, going up and balancing on the same wire as he took. "Go on and float on over Minnie. I'll catch up." Minnie nodded and floated over the canyon towards the other side. "Erg, this is so unfair. Fangy, you fly over, too." Mina whined and said to her Golbit, Fangy, who took to the skies. Mina jumped over onto another wire, using her quirk to slide across easily. "Interesting," Shinsu said, watching more and more students go on ahead, with a devious grin on his face. "In the world of heroes, it can be hard to become popular without a flashy enough quirk," Mick announced, turning towards Aizawa. "Right, Eraserhead." A comical tick mark appeared over the mummy that was Aizawa. "I don't know what you're talking about, idiot." The one a teacher growled, annoyed. Anyways, looks like Todoroki is still skating on past the obstacles easily." Mick continued announcing the event, monitors showing Todoroki skating across the wires via his eyes. Todoroki looked behind him to see Ninetales struggling, yet catching up to her trainer, jumping onto even smaller, more jumbled together platforms that were surely made for more land-based Pokemon to cross. "I can't slow down now for her," Todoroki thought. "I'll have to leave that to her to catch up." But look here, it seems the Katsuki Bakugo is catching up to Todoroki," Shoto heard Mick said. True to his words, Todoroki peeked behind him to see the explosive teen flying towards him, gaining on him. "So he's finally gotten serious, huh?" he asked to himself. "You suck," Bakugo roared out as he rushed forward. Iida slowed to a stop over the fall. He looked towards his dojo and nodded, wordlessly telling the Pokemon to go on ahead. Dojo nodded, taking a few steps back before dashing into a jump, soaring high in the air, landing on a platform, and before jumping towards the next. Emboldened further by his Pokemon, Iida breathed in deeply. "My older brother is probably watching me on." Iida's eyes widened with pure passion and rushed forward, spreading his arms out to his side. "I can't let him see me look foolish. I got this." What resulted was Iida in a funny cross-like pose, his right foot crossed to the side, and the other behind, firing up the engines in his legs, his body wiggling as he struggled to balance himself on the wire. "Boy, does he look foolish," Mick declared, Iida's resolve in vain. "Wow, the other students are catching up, but the guy in the lead's still pretty far ahead," a man in the crowd said as they watched Todoroki on the monitors. "His quirk is really powerful, but it is his natural athletic talent and keen judgment keeping him in first place." The man beside him, who had a third eye on his forehead, replied. "Well, I'm not surprised," the third guy next to them said. "Don't you guys know who his dad is? The flame hero. Endeavor." "Wait, for real?" the first guy exclaimed in surprise and awe. "That guy is second only to All Might himself. Agencies will be tearing each other apart to have him as a sidekick." The second guy nodded. As they talked, a man watched the event from the back. He was tall, practically as tall as All Might in his buff form, with short red hair, and wearing a blue costume that showed his large muscular physique. What stood out about this man's outfit was the lines of red-hot magma-like fire that streamed intricately around his costume, and, of course, the bright wild flames that sprouted from his shoulders and his upper face, giving him a fiery mask over his eyes and forehead. Endeavor watched his son run with an angry, almost disappointed frown. Back to the race, Todoroki slid to a halt, pausing as he looked at what was in front of him. "And now we pull up to the last obstacle of the race." Mick's voice projected over the speakers above two large white signs with the bright yellow words "Danger Mines," highlighted by black and red explosion drawings, a large red skull plastered over in the middle. Past the signs, the large rectangular field was mostly flat, save for the dozens and dozens of particular darker circles of dirt. "Everybody better tread carefully. You're stepping onto a minefield. If you look very carefully, you will see where those little explosives are buried. So keep your eyes on the ground, folks," Mick warned. "Oh, and before we get some complaints about excessiveness, those landmines were designed for the games, so they may be loud, flashy, and can knock you on your ass, but they really aren't all that powerful. Just enough for you to wet your pants as you sail through the sky. Get a hold of yourself." Aizawa tried bringing his co-host back down to earth. "Shit, Todoroki's probably the one who's made it there." Izuku cursed, inwardly, he and Kamiskin speeding up. "Gotta go faster." As he and many of the other students made it to the last obstacle, an unfortunate soul stepped onto one of the mines. The mine exploded in a bright yet light explosion, yet still sent the student flying off. Clever. Todoroki groaned, yet admitted, as more and more students fell victim to the mines and flew off. With this, it puts those who are in the lead at a disadvantage, so the others could keep up. Suddenly, the sound of explosions grew louder, Todoroki looking back to see Bakugo right behind him, flying over the mines with his explosions, flashing a victorious grin. Ha. It's over, you half-and-half bastard. And with that declaration, Bakugo blasted right past Todoroki. Your declaration of war was to the wrong person. Bakugo struck his arm out towards Todoroki with an explosion, Todoroki barely sidestepping away. And with that Katsuki, Bakugo finally takes the lead. Mick yelled as the fans roared in cheers. The crowd is going crazy. There's nothing they like more than an upset. Todoroki continued dodging Bakugo explosions, trying to continue forwards while being careful not to land on a mine. Crap, his quirk is making him float over the mines, and I can't use my ice without risking setting off some mines on accident. Todoroki thought over his options, already tossing aside the other option that popped up in the back of his head. I got to knock him to the mines. Todoroki finally looked back to see Ninetales was gaining on them, running past the mines with speed and grace. Ninetales, blast him away. Moonbliss. Ninetales complied, raising her mouth and forming an orb of glowing pink energy, and launched it at Bakugo. The explosive blonde easily noticed and launched himself backwards by firing explosions from his forward-facing palms. He managed to dodge as the fairy-type move sailed between him and Todoroki. Bakugo quickly struck his hand back and let out smaller, multiple explosions to keep himself aloft, and not set off a mine. Bakugo scoffed and before growling out Kolava. Deal with that stupid fancy shit with flamethrower. On cue, Kolava, pulling up to Ninetales, fires a stream of fire from his mouth. Ninetales managed to jump away and steer away from the flames, with the two now clashing similarly to their trainers. Hey. The rest of the competitors are catching up, too. Mick revealed. Iida and Dajuo tried running past the mine at full sprint, explosions setting off behind them. They tried to outrun the explosions they set off, only for them to set off a few, and the vine-haired girl was beginning to catch up, her vine hair, as well as her Tangelus tentacles stretching out into the ground to sense and maneuver away from the mines. The pale teen with the skulking face was catching up as well, his feet almost gliding across the ground and over the mines, like it was liquid. Meanwhile, below him, his Dugtrio dug its way underneath the field of explosions and the mines. Its journey was not alone as it was digging alongside a Gabite, her trainer above floating over the mines with her multiple floating body parts. Ew, and what's this? Can our two leaders fight each other off and stay in the lead? Mick continued as Bakugo, Todoroki and their Pokemon clashed carefully against each other, Todoroki backing Bakugo's exploding palms away from his face, and grabbing Bakugo's forearm. The blonde quickly smacked the white and red-haired teen's hand away, with only his forearm now encased in ice. Meanwhile, in the back, Izuku cursed under his breath. His position among the front falling to almost the back of the middle pack. Izuku couldn't move as fast as Iida to avoid the bombs, or have the sensory capabilities like that vine-haired girl fly over the obstacles like the moss-green-haired girl or Bakugo, leaving Izuku and Combuskin to carefully trudge through the mines. They considered jumping only for a second before another student tried and showed why that wasn't a good idea. Crap, I'm getting overtaken, and I don't know how many will qualify for the next round. Izuku thought, panicking. I gotta think of something. Think. Izuku looked to see Bakugo and Todoroki clashing, Bakugo attempting to fire an explosion at Todoroki. He then saw Iida and Dajuo get blasted by multiple explosions around them, the blue-haired teen's ingenuity and quick wit keeping him from flying off into the dis. The gear in Izuku's brain clicked with an idea. Risky, probably would backfire on him if he didn't angle it right, but he had no other choice. Combuskin, follow me lead. Izuku said to his fire-type Pokemon. With an affirmative nod, Izuku grabbed the plating the UA robot, strapped to his back, out and into the dirt. Gotta be careful. They only go off if you step on them. Izuku said as he dug up a mine carefully pushed it to another one. They may not be powerful, but if you set off a whole bunch of them, like Iida did, then they become a greater pain and make larger explosions. Combuskin carefully dug up another bomb with her claws and copied Izuku. I can't jump over them, even Asui's not jumping because of how risky it is to land. Izuku peeked over to see Asui and Polydid carefully crawling on the ground, as well as seeing Kirishima and Tetsu clash, Mineta jumping towards Momo with his balls out, not like that, you perverts, and the others carefully and slowly walking. But I can't go slow or I'll be stuck in the back of the pack with no way of knowing if I make it in. There are a lot of explosions at the end, more than back here, but everyone was careful at the start, so there are plenty of them still left to gather. Izuku thought as he continued. But I gotta be careful how I do this, or I'll be blown the opposite direction, or worse. while her Noibit was flying over the field and, upon her instruction heading towards the finish line, Kyoka walked carefully around the mines, using her jacks to sense where the bombs were. Hearing the sounds of shuffling dirt and shoveling, she looked behind to see Izuku and Komaskin digging up a cluster of dirt in front of them. "What's Midoriya doing?" Kyoka muttered, perplexed by what her green-haired class rep was doing. Her ever-growing desire to find out more about Midoriya, and why the girls were so interested in him, surfaced back up again. However, shaking her head, reminding herself of the task at hand, Kyoka turned away and continued through the minefield. As Mick continued announcing something about multiple flying Pokemon of the students already making it to the finish line and waiting for their trainers, Izuku sat there. Done. In front of him and Komaskin was a decent pile of dug-up landmines, gathered together, some noticeably angled towards the finish line. "Are you sure I can't convince you to not try this stupid risky move?" Komaskin pleaded. "Nope," Izuku replied. "Alright, just checking, before we're blown to bits." Komaskin sighed. Izuku raised his makeshift shield up in front of him, strapping the wire of the plate around his hand. Komaskin got beside him, wrapped another wire around her paw. "Ready? If I have to," Komaskin replied. "Yep," Eevee replied, in his mind. "Indeed." Froakie croaked. "Fine." Pikachu groaned. "But if you drop me, I swear I'll zap you into charcoal." "Here we go." "Thanks for the idea, Bakugo." Izuku and Komaskin, shield up and in their hand paw, ran up and jumped towards the mines. Super turbo speed. Upon landing, the back of the field was engulfed in a massive explosion, blasting a few unfortunate to be around to fly away. "What the?" Mick exclaimed in shock, his shock mirrored by the students on the field, bracing themselves from the light and wind from the explosive force. What was that huge explosion in the back? Ida braced himself against the light and wind, alongside the vine-haired girl and Tokoyami, his dark shadow hiding behind him with a teary pained expression. That was way more powerful than it should have been. Serena and Uraraka squinted against the light of the explosion, but as it died down, they noticed and looked at a figure blasting out of the pink mist of the explosion. With shocked eyes, the two and all the rest saw Izuku and Komaskin soaring through the sky at blistering speeds, riding on their shield. "Incredible!" Mick roared out with the crowd. "Yes." All Might, too, roared, fists raised into the air with relieved elation. "What just happened?" Mick roared out his question. Asui, Mina, and Higakure looked up with shocked expressions. Kyoka's recovered from her stumble from the explosion to see Midoriya the culprit and flying. Serena and Uraraka's shock quickly turned to awe and joy. Kirishima and Tetsutetsu stopped their fighting to see the green-haired teen fly. Midoriya Iida questioned as Midoriya flew past him. Takage looked above her to see Izuku on his shield soaring just above her as she floated in sky. Takage managed to look at Izuku's face as he sailed past her, eyes ablaze, like during his speech, and a wide grin on his face that would make All Might jealous. The world felt like it was crawling at a slowpoke's pace. Her widened eyes held a sparkle in them, her heart skipping a beat, her stomach churning like a pair of butterflies were swarming in her. Whatever just happened back there, Todoroki and Bakugo stopped their clash as they saw Izuku and Komaskin blast towards them. Class 1A's Izuku Midoriya is rocketing in hot pursuit of first place. Izuku and Komaskin sailed over the two. Correction. The lead is his. The crowd roared in cheers, practically losing their minds. While Mitsuki laughed like a maniac, Inko cupped her hands over her quivering, smiling mouth. "Izuku." She whimpered in pride and joy. "This is awesome." Eevee screamed, laughing in fun, as he and the rest could feel the speed in their Pokeballs. I'm going to be sick. I'm going to be sick." Pikachu gagged at the turbulence while inside his death trap of a Pokeball. "Is this all part of the plan?" Komaskin roared out loudly through the wind. "Mostly," Izuku replied through his mind. "I tried to pile more for both our weights, but there was more force than I expected. And what?" Komaskin pestered for an answer. "I didn't think about how." "What?" Komaskin and Pikachu both yelled. "Deku." Deku could hear Bakugo roaring behind him, even with the wind in his ears. Bakugo blasted into the sky and shot out towards him with clear fury in his eyes. "What the hell do you think you are doing?" Todoroki stomped his foot and formed a long path of ice in front of him. "This ice path will end up helping others, but there's no time to worry about that." Todoroki rationalized as he, Ninetales, and Kulava all ran quickly to catch up. "What a plot twist. Those two aren't fighting anymore." Mick roared out. "They're chasing Midoriya. The common enemy can make the bitterest of rivals set aside their differences to face as one." Aizawa sagely commented. "This race is far from over. Anything can happen now." All Might clenched his fists, sweat pouring down his brow. "Oh no, we're losing speed." Izuku noticed their slowing momentum, Bakugo and Todoroki right on him. "Think fast. Gotta plan this out or I'll lose the lead." Komaskin. "On my signal, jump in front of the plate with all your strength," Izuku commanded in his mind. Before the confused Komaskin could reply, Izuku continued, "Don't question me. Just trust me." Komaskin was silenced and nodded. Just as their descent was matched with Todoroki and Bakugo, Izuku pulled the shield upwards a bit and screamed out now. Combusken's legs almost bulged with how much she leapt forwards, clearing the minefield. Izuku's body spun in the air at Combusken's jump, as well as his shield. As Todoroki and Bakugo were side to side with him, Izuku's body was upright in the air, hand clutched tightly on the wire of the shield. No time to worry. No time to hold back. Green lightning sparked around him, his eyes ablaze with green and blue energy. Show the world who you are. Izuku swung the shield with all his might onto the ground in front of him, onto the mines below. A powerful explosion blasted out, sending the two rivals and their Pokemon back, as it launched Midoriya forwards. Landing with a rough but manageable roll, Izuku got up to his feet as Combusken landed in front of him. The two's eyes opened with fierce fiery passion. No holding back. The two roared in their minds. Fusion move. Fiery Comet. Combusken roared, activating Aerial Ace and Flame Charge, her body ablaze with fire, her black silhouette and ablaze yellow eyes, making her look like a demon. Break the limits. One for all. Full cowling. 8%. Trainer and Pokemon both blasted forwards in an instant. True to his move's name, Combusken soared forwards like a burning comet. Meanwhile, Izuku's rocketed forwards like a jolt of lightning, leaving Bakugo and Todoroki in the dust. I don't believe it. And just like that, Izuku Midoriya rocketed past his classmates into first place. Mick roared out. Deku. Bakugo roared, blasting out of the smoke of the landmine's explosion, and towards his former punching bag. Kulava followed his trainer closely behind, activating Quick Attack to keep up. Todoroki and Ninetales shot out of the smoke as well, the two slighting of Todoroki's ice, with Ninetales unleashing her icy wind as a propulsion. Todoroki and Bakugo are still in it, trying to catch up to Midoriya. Mick continued announcing. Yet Midoriya and his Combusken seem almost faster than before. What's up with that? It's obvious, you idiot. Aizawa replied, looking at the problem child of his class. It's clear that throughout the race, Midoriya has been using a lower percentage of his quirk, rather than using all he could muster safely. He used his quirk to keep a fair degree of speed to keep up with his classmates, only reserving his full available speed for the final stretch of the race, keeping his strength until he needed it. Your students are amazing. Just what have you been teaching them? Mick asked for the audience who thought similarly. This has nothing to do with me. Aizawa responded, looking at Midoriya, Todoroki, and Bakugo. Each of them is powered by their own drive to succeed. You heard it, folks. Eraserhead has admitted to being a terrible teacher. What? Quickly catching up, all three ran as fast they could, reaching into the doorway and running towards the light of the end. I wouldn't lose. I wouldn't lose. I wouldn't lose to Deku again. Was all Bakugo could think, releasing greater explosions to propel him faster. I already lost to that loser EV, I wouldn't lose to a more pathetic second stage fire starter. Kulava thought, picking up the pace with Quick Attack. More speed. More. Help Shoto reach his goal no matter what. Ninetales exclaimed in her thoughts, blasting out more icy wind from her mouth. I wouldn't lose. Not to him again. I'm going to surpass him in all might. Todoroki roared in his mind, pushing more ice to slide on. Go beyond. Combusken roared, blasting forwards with a cry. Plus Ultra. Deku yelled, white sunlight blasting his eyes. And the first to make it back to the stadium, his red shoes and fiery talons, slid to a halt. Izuku Midoriya. Izuku and Combusken were met with confetti and the screams of the crowd. Izuku. My baby. Inko cried out waterfalls for tears. Mitsuki hugged her best friend, regardless of getting soaked by Inko's tears. Woo. That was awesome. Mirio clapped and cheered excitedly with the crowd. Indeed, it was cool. Tamaki nodded and smiled, clapping more calmly and respectfully. Nijira looked upon the green-haired teen as he stood among the cheers of the entire world, how the lightning sparked off his body, and how his already storming aura seemed ablaze and roaring. She smiled wide enough, she almost broke her face. Outside the stadium, Death Arms, Kamui Woods, and Mount Lady were standing guard by a gate for authorized personnel only. Well, more like Death Arms and Kamui Woods stood guard, and Mount Lady was busy posing for the cameras of overeager fans and photographers. Death Arms looked behind him to see the large monitor over the entrance. Blinking in recognition, Death Arms spoke up, "Hey look, it's that kid." Kamui turned as well, seeing Izuku crossing the finish line and standing triumphant as the winner. Oh yeah. Kamui said, recognizing the kid. He fought the sludge monster a year ago. Vaguely overhearing the two, Mount Lady turned to the screen mid-pose. She looked at his rather lean, yet muscular build, his messy emerald hair flowing in the wind. He looks cute. Mount Lady thought. Where have I seen him before? Mr. Mime jumped and clapped for joy, ecstatically. The Asui family jumped from their seats and cheered for their unofficial member of the family. Look, Wishy. Satsuki moved the bowl containing Wishiwashi closer to the TV screen. It's Big Bro Izu who gave you to me. He won. Isn't that great? Wishiwashi's usually sad face was smiling, swimming in circles around its bowl and cheer. That brat. Shigaraki growled, his scratching intensified, glaring hatefully at the victory of the brat who broke his hand, who was being loved by this accursed crowd. The voice of his master was still silent, with only a tiny, almost inaudible chuckle being heard. Night Eye stared at the screen showcasing the boy victory with a silent, expressionless mask over his face, his eyes hidden by the white glare of the monitor. Suddenly, he scoffed, unimpressed, and totally not at all biased in his opinion. Nope, not at all. Cynthia rubbed her chin, a smirk on her face as he witnessed the Izuku Midoriya and his cooperation with his Combuskin, not to mention her skills and moves. Interesting, she said simply. Riolu was cheering for Izuku's victory. Lucario gave a brief nod of approval from his expressionless face. The raven-haired former student of Taishi simply remained silent, staring at the boy with glowing ocean blue eyes, inspecting his aura that seemed almost overflowing. The man smirked. Maybe the old man's onto something. High above the stadium, overlooking the whole event, a mysterious, transparent creature looked down to see Izuku and Combuskin standing victorious. The creature giggled with joy and fulfilled amusement, dancing and flying in circles around the sky, at how fun the event was. The cheers of the crowd felt almost numb to Izuku. He stared blankly at the thousands of cheering fans and onlookers, their faces a blur to his eyes. In his search, they and their cheers, all directed for him, seemed inconceivable, impossible even. Finally, his eyes found the only person he wished to see. High up in the teachers' stands, All Might clapped with the rest of the teachers, a smile stretched wide and sunken eyes brimming with pride. Izuku's eyes watered with tears but stared back, smiling back with equal measure of gratitude, his right fist clenched and raised high into the air, to the roaring approval of the audience. They again all seemed numb to him, only focusing on All Might's approving nod. The words spoken between the two unsaid, but heard loud and clear. Finally, his thoughts were snapped away by the cheer of his Pokemon. You did it, Izuku, Eevee said. We knew you would. I always knew. Izuku's left hand wiped away the tears that threatened to spill. He looked up to see Combuskin in front of him, smiling and paw raised up. Izuku smiled and nodded, wordlessly high-fiving his Pokemon. Yes, we did. Thanks for listening. I do hope you enjoyed. If you want the next part of this video, like, subscribe and comment down below, and turn on the bell notification. And also check out other videos that I have created and enjoy. See you in the next video. Peace.